So what this is it's a way to scale your company larger without having to add labor. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Lawns Across America podcast. I think this is probably one of the only ones I've done this. Well, I'm sure it is. It's one of the only ones I've done this year. So thank you for joining me. Trust me, I love podcasting. It's the editing I don't like. Listening to my own voice for up to 2 hours while I edit is not fun. So yeah, I know you're thinking, well, why don't you just pay somebody to do it? And I could. And so there's a lot of other excuses I could come up with, but the truth is I do enjoy doing this. I like the long form content. I will tell you that the prep takes a lot longer because I kind of have to sit down and decide how is it going to flow? What am I going to do? What am I going to talk about? Of course, today we have an interview that's going to come up towards the end. I'm going to give you some mindset tips here in the beginning. We're going to talk about all lawn types, all different lawns in the summer here. And at the end, I'll have an interview with an entrepreneur that is in the robot mower space, but he's approaching it differently than I had ever imagined that anyone would. It's kind of similar to some of the things I talked about, but he's really kind of taken it to a different level, and we kind of go into his business model and see how he's doing it, realizing that the robotic mower space is still very new and adoption has not happened in the greater population, yet he started this business around it and is early into the game. And so I think it'll be interesting for you to learn how he's approaching it and how he's growing a business in it. But until then, let's talk about some of the things that we've got going on in Lawns Across America, because that's the name of the podcast here. And we're going to start down here in Florida. Now, I know this doesn't even matter to the most of you, but just think about it. Just listen as we go, as we talk about the different types of conditions that we're all facing around the country. Here in Florida, on the west coast of Florida especially, now I've talked about this quite a bit. We had a drought last summer, a record drought. And my lawn actually did really well. The good thing that came with having a drought last year was no disease pressure, because of the fact that the humidity was also down with it. So all of that water not being there, a little bit lower humidity, I had actually a pretty easy year. I have a good irrigation system, and it was able to keep up. My lawn looked great. Then we came through winter. I had a normal winter, some disease here and there. My Empire zoysia got rocked with large patch disease. By the way, any of you that have Empire zoysia in Florida, you just can count on having disease all winter. Just doesn't matter. It just is what it is. It doesn't cause long-term damage. And as you can see, here's what my zoysia looks like today. It is gorgeous. It's beautiful. The thing about it is now we are in a rainy season, a normal rainy season here in Florida. So in the last month and a half, we're in a normal rainy season, but the spring we had another drought. So spring, we watered our way through it. We worked hard. I even made videos where I talked about you guys in Texas. Man, I know how you feel. You guys in Texas where all summer where your St. Augustine struggles because you're not getting rain. Typically, that's how we were in the springtime where we didn't have any rain help at all, and my irrigation was having trouble keeping up for whatever reason. So, these are the different struggles that I faced this year, and now here we are in a summer with a normal rainy season. Now, our normal rainy season in Florida is where we get rain almost every single afternoon. We'll get almost an inch, sometimes even more, and it comes down in 30 to 45 minutes. The storms that we get are so powerful, so fast, and so quick. It's not like really anywhere else in the country as far as the fact that we have them consistently every single day. Now, every once in a while, we'll get what I call a good rain, which is a nice long sprinkle for an hour or two, but for the most part, they're passing storms. You guys come here, you see the clouds build, they blow across the state, and they drop rain as they go. And that's typically what we get. So what is that? That's the perfect amount of rain for St. Augustine grass and zoysia grass, and we have some Bermuda in Florida, and of course, Bahia grass. All of the grasses here, but especially the Bahia, are looking incredible because we have all of this rain. Now, what does that bring as a challenge? Well, as you will see, if you watch my video this week that I did out at the Freedom Factory, it brings flooding problems. Now, that's a site that is not like a home. It's essentially a giant bowl. And so I need you to imagine, think about this. When it rains, you have water that hits your lawn. You think about that. But how many of you think about the amount of gallons of water that hit your roof, go down into your gutters, and go down your downspouts? Or if you don't have gutters and downspouts that just leak off the side of your roof, think about the amount of water that falls on your roof. If you have a 2,000 square foot house, maybe you have 2,000 square foot of roofing, how much rain? I'm sure somebody could calculate that too. I'm sure there's a way to calculate that. but how much rain falls in that 2,000 square foot of water of space, and then it goes into your gutters, and then down what? Maybe you have 7 or 8 downspouts around your house. So all of that water is concentrated to 7 or 8 points into your lawn, and it shoots out into your lawn. That is a major problem for some folks in Florida because you got to control the flow of water. You got to get the flow of water. You got to get the water off of your property. You don't want it sitting. So that means you can't have low spots. You can't have areas that pool. You need that water. That's why they have swales in between houses, and they have that everywhere. But they're really important here in Florida to get that water off of your property, down into the street and into the storm sewers. And if you don't have that taken care of, that will cause a large amount of the problems right now. And in fact, many of the problems that I see in lawns right now are actually due to poor drainage. Sure, there might be some disease there. There might be some other issues, but the underlying problem is that the water is not being managed on the property, and it's sitting too long in certain spots, and it's allowing, well, first of all, it just drowns the grass out. Wet feet just drowns it right out. But then secondly, that does allow disease to manifest more often. And the other thing, and the real thing about having water sitting is it gives the disease a mode of travel to move across and spread. Now, the Freedom Factory is a different deal. We don't have downspouts there. There what we have is an oval track, an 1/8 mile oval of paved blacktop that is banked. I don't know what the degree of bank is there, but it is banked so that all the water flows into the grass in the infield. Now, there is drainage in the infield that's been there since the track was built, I guess in the 70s or whatever, but that drainage was made for that track with only the oval. Now we've got an inner track that was built, and we have a giant concrete burnout pad in the middle that was never there before. And so these same drains that were designed for that old layout are now having to take care of carrying water out of the track from this new configuration. And we've had challenges, and they're not made for that. They're not in the right spots, basically. Now, we've had this challenge from the beginning, and we actually had a couple years ago, we had drainage installed, additional drain tile put in, as well as surface drains. And that was working fine, but then as they're always doing construction out there, they're constantly improving the track. They had to put in new light poles, and when they did that, the heavy equipment that they had to bring over crushed some of the drainage that we had. And then they had to do some sort of digging or something to bring wiring in to the poles. I mean, there's all these poles, they're not just wired for light. They've got, I don't know if it's coax or Cat 5 or Cat 6. I don't know what it is, but they're wired for everything now. Because of the way that the technology works around the track, that's all been upgraded. Well, all of that different moves and digs and different things, that ruined the drainage on one side. It destroyed the drainage on one side. The other side, we were able to get that fixed. Our team that did the sod, when they were doing the regrading, they were able to find the breaks in the drainage on the west side of the track and fix that. So the drainage over there is a little better, but the drainage on the west side is completely no good anymore. And we have very large areas that are pooling once again. So what we're doing is we're getting some sand out there. We're going to try to do some sand. It's called sand leveling, top dressing, whatever you want to call it. I'm really trying to do it to build up a few areas and hopefully bring the grass level up so that the water can then drain off. I don't know if this will actually work. Can you take a low spot and build it up so that water will stop pooling there and flow across? Can you do that while the lawn is still there? I'm assuming you can by doing it slowly over time, and we're going to try that. If it doesn't work, then we'll just hire somebody to come in and install more drainage, but that's time and money. And, this is a beautiful track. There's a lot that goes on there. And anytime I ask them or tell them or make a suggestion, hey, this is something we need to do, they always say yes, but it's always got to be fit into a certain budget. And I would rather try to get away with doing things, a little less invasive and a little cheaper to start with. Now, sand is not cheap. We actually got, I don't know exactly how much it is. I thought it was 10 yards, but I just talked to them and there's 10 tons now sitting out there. But I have another truck coming Monday. So I ordered the sand through a friend, and then they did this and that. And so I'm not really in touch with the people bringing the sand out directly. So I'll get a final number. I'll put it on the screen here in the podcast. And then again, if you watch the video that's on my channel by the time this comes out, that will also have some more information on the sand. But all the leveling is going to happen next week, towards the later part of the week. I just had the sand delivered now. So all of that to say, if you're a fan of the Lawn Care Nut channel, make sure you're watching because I've got some pretty cool stuff coming up. If you want to know something that people search about, they definitely search about how to level a lawn and how to spread sand. I got an Eco Lawn top dresser that I borrowed from one of our customers who also has a really interesting story at his lawn that we're going to be showing. He basically has a lawn that went from nothing to thick and beautiful Bermuda in about 6.5 months. and there's a robot mower involved there and a lot of FERT. So very interesting stuff coming up on the Lawn Care Nut channel. But what I'm getting at, in Florida, the big challenge right now is water management and then disease. Disease comes along when you have a lot of water flowing, a lot of water falling. Water does not cause disease, but it just allows it to manifest and spread. And then, of course, along with that comes a lot of humidity, and humidity is part of the conditions that make for disease to be able to outbreak. Remember, disease comes from three things. Number one, you have to have a host. In our case, it's turf grass. And then number two, you have to have a susceptible host. So we have turf grass that's susceptible to certain disease. Second thing you have to have is the disease itself has to be present. And the third things are the conditions need to be right. And in Florida, for Rhizoctonia, which is a large patch, or brown patch, as you call it up north, Rhizoctonia is the pathogen name. The conditions are humidity and heat. Those are really, humidity. Humidity is the big one, and obviously heat comes along with that. And so that's really what makes that, or allows that to manifest. So we're actually not having disease problems at the Freedom Factory right now. We are having some sod webworm problems or issues, which are easy to take care of, and lots of weed pressure. So lots of stuff going on out there, but that's what we're dealing with. When you do get disease in your St. Augustine grass because of the conditions we have, you have to decide, am I going to work my way through it, just let the lawn work its way through it, or am I going to apply fungicides? I've been doing a little bit of both this year. In past years, I just let the lawn work through it. It never causes long-term damage. It looks really bad when you first cut it. This is the thing about St. Augustine grass during the wet period of summer in Florida, and it's probably like this everywhere else. In the summertime, when you cut it, it doesn't look good. You look down on it, and it's all brown. There's brown and dead stuff, and that's because it's sloughing, and it's growing, and it's moving, especially with all this rain. It's really spreading, so it's sloughing and growing and sloughing and growing, and you see all the slough. You see all the dead stuff down in there. It just looks terrible. And then, of course, you do like I did, and you overgrown mow twice in a row, which if you guys watch the channel, you've seen that, which leaves clumps, and that makes it even worse. And so when you cut it, it just looks terrible. I mean, it does. You look at that and go, oh my gosh, it's going to die. It can look that way. But if you give it 2 days and let it start to grow again and get some sunlight, it looks fine. So I just need to tell y'all, with St. Augustine lawns, especially in Florida, it's going to look terrible when you cut it all during summer. It's just going to look that way, especially if it's a thicker lawn. If you have a thin St. Augustine lawn, it won't show that. It won't show that at all. It'll look fine, but it just won't look thick either. But it won't show all that brown sloughing because it's just not moving. It's just sitting there, not thick, not vigorous, right? My lawn is still growing. It's still vigorous. It's still thick. And so I do get that ugly kind of look to it because it's so thick. I don't know if that makes sense. If you have a thinner St. Augustine lawn, it won't do that. But here's the trade-off. The thinner St. Augustine lawns right now, because of all the rain, are getting tons and tons of weeds. And tons is a technical term, let me tell you. My St. Augustine lawn, I think I have 2 weeds in it right now. Rains every day. I can't find, I could probably find 2 or 3 little small patches. That's it, because my lawn is so thick. But again, it doesn't look that great. And because it's thicker, it does kind of harbor moisture and stuff inside of it a little more. And so I think it probably is a little bit more susceptible to disease. But would you rather focus on having a thin St. Augustine lawn and not thick and allow weeds to come in and have to use chemical there? You see, there's always a trade-off. And that's kind of the gist of what I want to talk about today, because I'm going to get to the rest of you as well with different types of lawns. There's always a trade-off in everything you do. There's always positives and negatives to everything. Every grass type has its positives, and every grass type has its negatives. And those positive and negatives can change depending where you live. The positives of zoysia in Florida might be really different than the positives of zoysia in Oklahoma, where they have a different, drier climate. You see? But in Oklahoma, they get a longer winter. They get colder sooner, so you have a longer dormancy, whereas in Florida, it doesn't really go dormant. But then again, because we have higher humidity for most of the year, and this rainy season, it's going to be more susceptible to disease. So what I'm trying to get at is there's no perfect grass for the perfect place, and there's no perfect place to live where you can find the perfect grass. There's only doing the best you can, or what I used to say is loving the one you're with. No spouse is perfect either. They've all got positives and negatives. So you can choose to focus on the positives and ignore the negatives, or focus on the positives and do your best to work with and improve the negatives, or if they're negatives that you can improve because they just are the way they are. If you're a tall woman married to a short man, don't try to make him taller. It just ain't going to happen. So you just have to learn to love the one you're with. This is exactly how it works with the grass. If you are that person in Oklahoma or somewhere in the transition zone and you have zoysia, don't try to keep it green all winter, because it's not going to happen. Just like the short guy ain't getting any taller. You know what I'm saying, overbiter? So you got to think about that. When you look out at your lawn right now in the summer, no matter who you are, it's going to have positive and negative, and right now might be a negative. For me right now in Florida, I'm glad I have St. Augustine grass. Yes, it's growing, and I have to mow it every 3 days, and it hasn't been fertilized now. This is July. I haven't fertilized it since mid-May. So you can't say, well, Alan, you push too much nitrogen. No, I'm in a blackout. I don't push too much nitrogen, and it still grows super fast. Now, is it as green as I want? No. I'm going to have to use a little microgreen, get some iron on there to get it greener. But is it growing fast? Yes. Is it thick? Yes. Does it look better than most people's in my neighborhood? Oh, yes, it certainly does, right? Because it's thicker and because it's growing and it's vigorous. But I am having to mow it a lot. And when I cut it and I look down on it, I see a lot of dead crap that I don't like. So what do? I just don't look at that. I just step back and look at the lawn from far back where everybody else looks at it. Because this is just the nature of how my lawn grows this time of year. Same thing. It's like, think about bodybuilding too. You're not going to have, when you're a bodybuilder or you're in somebody that's in great shape, you don't feel like every single workout, every single day did you good. You actually have down periods where you don't feel like you're making any gains, where you don't have the energy and you're like, oh, man, what's going on? I'm eating right. I'm exercising. I'm getting enough sleep, but I'm just not getting my gains. You just hit this plateau. That happens. Well, what do you do? Do you say, well, I'm just going to give up? No, you work your way through the plateau. You work your way through until you get gains, or you change things up to make those gains continue, to get those gains reinvigorated. Well, the same thing is with the lawn. Right now, maybe there's environmental factors that you can't control. Just as if you're a bodybuilder and you break your leg, you're not going to work that leg out anymore. That's an environmental factor you can't control, right? But do you just give up on the rest of your body? No, you do everything else and you let that leg atrophy. When it comes back, you work it back to where it was. When you get through, when it's not broken anymore. The same with the lawn. You look at the lawn, you're like, man, in spring it was awesome, but man, it looks terrible right now. Okay, work your way through that. Continue sticking with the basics. Continue with eating clean, getting your cardio, staying hydrated, right? With the lawn, it's keep the mowing. Even if you think your lawn doesn't need to be mowed, go mow it. I promise you it'll look better because you'll cut the weeds down, but keep the mowing up. Keep the watering up as best as you can. If you have watering restrictions or you're just not able to water, do a little bit more than you did yesterday. Do a little bit more than you thought you could do. Keep limping it through. Do the best you can. The thing about this is that, the fall time is only 6 weeks away. This is the end of July right now. So you have 4 weeks of August and 2 weeks of September, and you're into the fall again. So this plateau or this tough spot that you're in is only going to last 4 to 5 more weeks, maybe 6 at the max. And you'll get through it. You'll start making gains again in the fall. And that goes for all of you. So the thing I'm trying to say is you need to stick to the basics no matter how hard it gets. Now, if you're somebody that is not struggling, if you're somebody that's still doing well because you're getting enough rain or you're getting enough water or whatever it could be, or you're having a mild season where you are, then you need to continue pushing your gains, enjoy those gains, and realize, hey, I dodged that bullet this year, but next season this might come. So that's why it's important to keep notes in your lawn journal, right? So hey, it's not like this every year. I've had good years before. When you do have a bad year, you can look back on previous years. Remember, y'all, this is not something, taking care of a lawn, again, just like bodybuilding or fitness, it's a lifelong commitment. Taking care of a lawn is not something you do for 1 year and leave it alone and it's good. If that was the case, then you should take up roofing or concrete work because you can do a stellar roof and you don't have to touch it again for 20 years. You can look at it and feel great for 20 years. That's not how lawns work. Just like your body, you can get in shape, get yourself down to, sub 15% body fat. And then if you don't maintain it, you'll lose it within a while, pretty quickly, as I can attest to. So always look at your lawn in that way, that you need to keep working on it. Always never give up. Maybe there's times when you're not feeling the weightlifting, so you just do cardio for a long time. That's okay. You got to keep doing something. Same with the lawn. So that's the encouragement I'm talking about. As we get back up to the transition zone, think about this. I talk to folks in the transition zone all the time because there's folks there with cool season grass and warm season grass, and there's no perfect grass in the transition zone. This is the middle of the country, right? Where you get a lot of the same kind of similar summer heat that I do. Think about people in the Carolinas. They'll get very similar summer heat and summer humidity that I do here in Florida, but in winter, it can be cold. Texas winters are cold. I remember being in San Antonio for basic training in 1993 from November until January, standing outside, and I had never felt such cold. It just whip right through you, that wind. It just blow right through you. So think about there. Are you going to grow warm season grass or cool season grass in these transition zone areas? I mean, you could choose one or the other. If you choose the warm season grass, you're going to have a much shorter season and you're going to have a much easier summer because your summer will be mild. And so your warm season grass will love it, but it may not green up until May or June even, right? Depending how far north you are. Whereas if you do cool season grass, it will probably go dormant in the summer, depending how far south you are, because it can't handle the heat and humidity no matter what you plant. But it's going to look gorgeous in the early spring, and in the fall, it'll stay green while everybody else is already dormant. So those are those pluses and minuses, negatives and positives. So what you got to do right now, if you're in the transition zone in the summer, is do I have cool season or warm season grass? If you have cool season grass and you're in South Carolina or somewhere like that, somewhere in the transition zone, even Kentucky, that cool season grass may not be handling it very well right now. It's okay, because you're going to get to have your spot when you get to the fall. As soon as you get September temperatures, your lawn is going to be gorgeous, right? And you'll be able to really push it. And because you're far south, you can actually continue pushing it probably all the way almost through Thanksgiving, because you got cool season lawns so far south. But now if you're in the transition zone right now and you have St. Augustine grass, which there is some a little bit further north, or zoysia, or likely Bermuda grass, it's probably doing really well right now. It's probably loving it. Now, I was just texting with BYD, and apparently there's a drought in Georgia. I didn't really look at that, but apparently there's a heat wave going through Georgia, so folks there are having trouble keeping up. That doesn't matter what your grass type is at that point. So, and in most of Georgia is really considered warm season turf, but North Georgia, there's some cool season turf. So just saying, all of you that no matter where you are, you're going to struggle. I look at folks, I think it's Michigan right now. I've seen lawns in Michigan that are dark green. So you guys must be getting a lot of rain in that part of the country. And that's really the thing with summer and anywhere across the Midwest or the East. The lawns can handle the heat. It's the humidity that gets cool season lawns, especially Kentucky bluegrass. I'll give you an example. I go to Salt Lake quite often because I have business partners that live there. And Salt Lake in the summer gets well above 100 degrees. Ask anybody that lives there. It's extremely hot, but it's also very dry. There's almost no humidity there. And you'll go, I've been in downtown Salt Lake, I'll take walks, and you go by all the businesses, hotels, restaurants, fast food places, churches, everything just public. They all have the most beautiful, dark, healthy green, blue-green Kentucky bluegrass. These are commercial properties, thin parkways, beautifully green, surrounded by concrete, and it gets over 100 degrees there. And the reason that their lawns survive is there's no humidity. See, the thing with cool season lawns that gets them, it is heat, yes, but it's heat plus humidity. Something about the humidity literally melts Kentucky bluegrass down to the ground. And causes it to go dormant. Heat with that humidity. But heat by itself, Kentucky bluegrass can do really well. And so can fescue, turf-type tall fescue, and so can rye. So I want you to think about cool season lawns. Getting all that rain is great, but you might also be dealing, though, with some, and if you're dealing with higher humidity, like in Michigan, you might also be dealing with some disease. I've seen some dollar spot out there. Dollar spot's nothing to worry about. I'm not about to go and try to tell you about disease too much on this podcast, because whenever I do that, people start to think that every brown spot they see is disease. And that's the last thing I want to talk about here with mindset. I'm starting to see this again too, and this is in all of the groups. If you wonder where I see this, I see it mostly on Facebook. We have a Lawn Care Nut Facebook group. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll give you a link in the description. Please join us. It's a private group, but anybody can join. And we do a lot of good stuff in there and help folks out. It's really awesome. But with that, I see this time of year, people see brown spots in the lawn, and what they'll say is, hey, here's a picture of my lawn. I got these few brown spots over here. I've already put down this fungicide twice, this insecticide twice. I'm about to put down this fungicide, and it's still brown. So y'all got to listen to me, okay? And I need your help with this, because we cannot be slinging chemicals like this. I realize that you've been taught by pharmaceutical companies that whenever you get sick, you put a chemical in your body to fix it. But that's not really how we should approach lawns. I'm of the philosophy of letting the lawn sit for a while, even dealing with it for 2 years. Just let it go. Keep with the basics: mowing, watering, fertilizing. Control your controllables and see what those diseases do. Do they only or those thin spots, do they only hang around for a little while, or do they thin out more in the winter when the days are shorter versus when the days are longer? If they're spreading fast, that's usually typically something more like insect. There's a lot of different things to look at, but the last thing I want you to do is say that I reached for the bottle of chemicals first, and when they didn't work, I threw down more. Because y'all, just listen, when you get a thin spot in your lawn, it doesn't fix itself the day after you put the chemical down. I don't care if it's an insect disease problem or what it is. It's not like you put the chemical down and now the lawn is regenerated. You might have killed the disease weeks ago, and you keep throwing all this chemical on there when you already took care of the disease. It's just taking your grass a while to regrow, especially cool season grass in the summer. Remember, we talk about the growth curves all the time. Cool season lawns do not grow that much in summer, even if they're green. they're not going to fill in. So you can throw all the chemical you want at the thin spot, but it's not going to turn into green grass again. It's not going to fill in. Wait till you get to the fall and it starts to regenerate and it starts to fill in on its own, especially with Kentucky bluegrass and cool season has rhizomes. They're not putting out a lot of rhizomes right now, but they will again in the fall. Rhizomes are the creepers. That's the runners, right? Southern grasses, same thing. They actually are putting out a lot of runners right now, but cool season grasses aren't. Different growth curve. Understand your grass type. Understand, did that thin spot show up last week? Has it been there for 2 years? And that's the other thing. People will say, I got these thin spots. I threw all these chemicals. And I'll ask them, well, how long has that been there? Well, I don't really know. I'm not sure when that got there. Well, why'd you throw chemical at it, bro? Don't do that. So stop reaching for the chemicals first and reach for your eyeballs and your pen and your pencil first. Or if you're using the Yard Mastery app, reach for your lawn journal first. Take pictures, make notes. Watch it. You're going to be with your lawn for life if you live in your house for life. Just like kids, right? When your kids have a problem, sometimes do you let them, do you try to fix it right away, or do you go, okay, we're going to give you some water and some Gatorade and you're going to get some rest and you're just going to rest until this sickness goes away. That happens a lot. We don't want to give our kids chemicals for everything. And why would you do that to your lawn? Work with it. Keep it hydrated. Keep it fertilized properly, right? Keep it mowed and cut. And let it regenerate on its own. Let it work its way through. And if it doesn't do that after you've observed it, and again, I said 2 years, but even after you've observed it for a year, remember, lawns change during the year because the angle of the sun changes, which means the shade, the sunlight exposure changes, not just from the length of days, but also from the positioning of the sun based on the trees around you in the house. And then sometimes the trees have more leaves than others after they drop their leaves. There's all of these things, and sunlight is a big part of it. Then there's water. All of that is stuff that's not in your control. And it's why you shouldn't throw chemicals at stuff first, because a lot of thin areas that you see may be just a function of sun positioning or water flow across your property or things like that. And those are only things that you can know after you observe for a while. So that was a long little rant there, but think about that. Always reach for the pen and the pencil or the taking pictures and keeping notes in your app first before you throw the chemicals down. I think that's always the best way to do it. And then look back and make sure that you're sticking with your basics. If you haven't even got your basics under control, then that could be part of the cause. And then third, look at the environment that you're in. How is water flow going across the property? How is foot traffic on the property? Do you have animals, people, sun position, all of these different things? Look at that. Learn your land first and foremost, and I think you'll be a much better lawn operator in the process. All right, y'all, now it's time for my interview with Adam from Greener. I hope you enjoy this. It's really cool talking to entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs in the green space that are working with technology that is just now coming up. And of course, I'm talking about robot mowers. You guys know I've been interested in those for quite a while now. So listen to this interview, and then I'll give you a few final thoughts in the end. All right, Adam, welcome. I'm really excited to have you today and learn a little bit more about your business. But I figured let's just start off, give everybody a little bit of understanding about your background and how you got to this point.
Thanks, Alan, for having me. I really appreciate being here today. I do not come from a traditional lawn care background. I was on Wall Street for 25 years and really was actually the beneficiary of using lawn care for many years. And I came across robotic lawn mowing way back in 2018 because I was struggling with what a lot of homeowners struggle with, which is, consistent quality service. And I found some robotic lawnmowers. At that time, it was the Husqvarna brand, and said, this is pretty interesting." And there wasn't a lot of documentation. Spent a lot of time installing one. Had a great experience. Within a couple of weeks, my lawn had never looked better. And this is now 6 years ago. And I was like, why isn't everybody doing this? And I was a serial entrepreneur after I ended my career on Wall Street. So I was like, I wonder if there's a business here. And I really came across an idea that said, it's not really in sales of these units. It's really about getting adoption and getting people to manage them because, and we'll talk a little bit further about this. They're not just set and forget. There's a lot of challenges that are associated with moving towards robotics, and I spent about 2 years really devising whether or not there was a program in place that we could actually do something. So
Hmm.
in 2020, we launched Greener here on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. It's a nice island. It's a great place to start something because you've got an interesting challenge or many interesting challenges here. We've since branched off into Eastern Long Island. We're in the Hamptons. We launched the Hamptons a year and a half ago. So we've been active there, and we provide robotics as a service, something that you've talked about on one of your previous podcasts and things like that. I've been following you for a couple of years. And what we would try to do is we partner with landscapers to provide outsourced mowing using robotic services. And so we could talk about that a little bit further today of how we're helping landscapers uh, solve their labor constraints, uh, effectively manage their costs. In many ways, we're lowering their costs while providing their homeowners with three important benefits. There's no noise with robotic mowing. It's consistently mowing, so you have a consistent product. Your lawn looks like a golf course. And ultimately, you are helping with the overall environmental impact because of either nitrogen used fertilizers. You reduce the need for that. You can use other kinds of fertilizers. Noise is a significant factor, and ultimately a better product.
That's pretty cool. So what I think, just from we have a lot to unpack there, but the thing
Sure.
that
Sorry.
no,
Sorry
that's
to
good. That
just
gives us
to
a
just give
great.
you, I've been dealing with the pitch for a long time.
Yeah, no,
So
I love it. That gives us a good launching point because I'm totally interested in this because you're approaching the adoption, and you're exactly right. You're approaching the adoption angle much different than anyone else has that I've talked to or that I've seen. So I want to get into that and the business side of it. But I think it's
sure.
cool that this came about because you're a homeowner looking to solve a problem, and you solve that problem with this technology, and you realize there's a business there. That's the entrepreneurial side of it, and that's really cool. And that's got to be so different from Wall Street, where I would assume you're inside in front of screens all day. Now you're outside and your office is people's lawns, and in your thinking process is different because you got to overcome, obstacles or bumps, and you have weather and like a whole different thinking process. So how was that to adjust from Wall Street, which seems high stress and high value and this and that, to outdoors and lawn care and really writing your own book because no one's written this book before?
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so glad that I did not get furnished any questions in advance. So this is really a good question that you asked. Well, first and foremost, spending my career on Wall Street and ultimately being the first customer, I think solving problems is really the big thing that people look at when you're an entrepreneur is what's the problem you're solving and why is it important? And it's really difficult at times to sort of like, I've got an idea and I've got this great solution, but I've got to find a problem for it. This was the opposite. I had a problem, and then I recognized that there were other people like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, is there a solution that actually makes this better? Yes, robotic mowing, but why aren't people doing it? Because it was literally it was an epiphany. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever had. And I know you've reviewed lawnmowers before, robotic lawnmowers, and you see the benefits from it. They work. And I was like, why isn't this just being done? And I recognized that technology is really hard to adopt. So when I think back on my career on Wall Street, it was all technology based because everything we did and we saw, I'm aging myself a little bit here, but I once worked in the commodity pits in Chicago, and everything was done with your hands, and so
Yeah,
you're
cool.
trading on the floor and you're
Ferris
and you're
Bueller's Day
pushing.
Off, man.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like, absolutely. And so here's a little side note: when your hands are away, you're selling, and when your hands are towards you, you're buying. And so that was about the most, you know, unautomated system that you can imagine, and how many billions of dollars were being transacted each day, basically with people's hands and pens. Today, that business is completely automated and electronic. So that business has seen a massive amount of technology change. And so when I look at my career on Wall Street, it was about how is technology basically taking the financial system and making it more efficient. So the big change that we saw back then, I'm sorry to dig in these weeds. This is not
No,
usually a
that's
lawn
good.
care discussion, but when I first started, the difference between the purchase price with the bid price of a stock and the offer price of a stock was a quarter. It's 25 cents. That was the standard, what they would call spread between a buy and sell. Today, that is fractions of pennies. In some cases, most often it's in a penny. So when you do, how can you do that Technology allows you to do that,
Right.
right? It compresses it. So, and I've said this before, but I paraphrase from Bill Gates, which is, the first rule of automation is that it makes efficient processes more efficient. The second rule of automation is that it makes inefficient processes even more inefficient. And that takes a lot of unpacking when you think about
Yeah, it
that,
does.
and so when you think of the landscaping industry and what I've seen on the Wall Street side, and now what I'm applying in the landscaping or green industry, is you're seeing the first stages of a shift from things that have been manually done for years that can now be automated. And it is now highlighting huge opportunities for improvement. So when you think of, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, when you're cutting your grass every day, like a golf course does, people think you need to water it more. That's not necessarily true because the grass clippings still have a lot of moisture in them. So
Mhm.
when they're reabsorbed, they are, renutrifying and reabsorbing water. But what it does do is it highlights problems that might be occurring on a lawn, and it accelerates the need for you to address that. And so in a traditional lawn care world where a landscaper is going on a weekly basis, let's just say, they will cut the grass and they'll notice a problem and it may not really be manifesting itself so significantly. And then a week goes by and then it seems a little bit worse. And they get some time to be able to manage that. But when you go to a robotic world, if you don't address that in a couple of days, it can actually be quite severe. So that's something that we deal with and what we have been dealing with at Greener since inception.
What's an example of that? Is it because the lawn is lower, so there's less foliage to hide problems? Is that what it is?
That's an interesting approach, and this is opinion more than fact. So I don't want to necessarily, overstep my bounds since I don't have a career in
Hey,
landscaping.
listen,
But
let's okay to let's
typically,
riff. Let's have fun. Why do you
that's right.
think? I love playing detective.
Yeah, well, so I think that when you have a longer blade of grass, it certainly can flop over and it can shield and hide things.
Hmm.
And that's traditionally why lawn cutting. So there's two reasons why lawn cutting traditionally has been longer grass height.
You're talking
Number
about cool
one
season
is
grass, right? Where you
cool
live.
season grass, right?
Yep.
Where I
Okay.
live. So I can't speak about what happens down in the South where you are. I
Yep.
know like people like it really short, and I'd actually like to ask you about that a little bit.
Sure.
Um,
Yep.
so maybe let me just flip it back to you. Why is it that Bermudas and warm season grasses are traditionally cut very short?
Well, so it depends which warm season grass you're talking about. So Bermuda grass and zoysia grass, they like to be cut low just because of the nature of their growth. If you let them go too long, they get leggy. So they just like a tree. They'll grow a stalk that's brown, and then there's only a
Right.
little bit of green at the top. And so if you're cutting tall, you have a lot less fudge factor. You start cutting into those legs, and you get a scalp mark or a brown spot. Whereas when you real mow it or mow below 1 inch, then everything is green. There's no room for that stalk to grow. So they just do better. And then those grass types will knit up and they'll knit tighter. Zoysia will form really bad thatch if it's grown too tall. So those are the ones. But the other one, but St. Augustine grass, for example, you want to mow that as tall as you can. Its stolons are all above ground, sitting on top of the ground. You want that because that's what creates competition for weeds. So whole different thing. But I didn't want to interrupt you there. So back to the
No,
cool
no,
season
that's all
because
right. And thank you for that.
yeah, well, here's the
It's
thing with
really
cool
helpful.
season grass. You go either way. So we
Right.
we have you've seen the guys online that are crazy that are real mowing at 3/8 of an inch on Kentucky bluegrass, and then you have people that are doing the traditional 3.5 inch or higher. So, but I want to get back to this. So you're saying that problems in the lawn are they reveal themselves quicker because of the robotic lawn mowing. So and I just said, well, maybe it's because of the foliage, but what are the reasons? Are you
No,
saying?
so no, and thank you for that. And I'm sorry that we digress. And that's why
Yeah, no, it's
usually
fun.
when you riff, these could be really good conversations. Um, so when you think about what you just described with a cool season grass, some do it short, some do it long.
Hmm.
It's really the labor market that's forcing it to be long, right?
Makes
Grass
sense.
likes to be cut at its optimal height. And what is the optimal height? I mean, I don't know, but I can say that people typically like it shorter because it's easier to walk on, and that's what sports turfs are like. And when you
Hmm.
think about what the problems that exist, most, if not all, problems are water related, either too much or too little. I mean, it's the one that, unless you have a completely, in a lab, right? Why does grass grow great in a lab? Because you're controlling everything.
Right.
But when you get out in the real environment and you get a situation where we've had, almost an inch of rain for the last day and a half here in the Northeast, that's a lot of rain for here, and the grass is really going to pop because it just grows with that. But if it was a dry season and you had irrigation, unless you're irrigating it enough, it might not grow as well, but it certainly can have some serious problems. So when you think about the things that you might want to do to attack that, because you're not looking at it day in, day out, you don't react as fast, and therefore you don't necessarily see the signs of problems that are occurring. You can see the signs a lot easier because you don't have, like you said, the foliage to hide those things. And so it just becomes more evident. And if it's ignored, it can become a problem very quickly. So that's what we think that, is part of the education process, and part of what we do here at Greener is being able to document that, being able to put that information into the hands of the landscapers so that they can perform the tasks that they know what they need to do.
So that's very interesting. And I totally agree. If you got a lawn that's low, it's just going to show all the problems quicker. And so that could be a positive. You got to look at that in a positive, but you're right. You're really retraining people, because everybody's, like you said, everybody's trained to mow tall. And I teach people to mow tall when they're beginners, because that's going to just be better. It allows more fudge factor, essentially. So when you're low like that and you basically are exposed, you'll see the problems quicker. That totally makes sense. I wanted to run back to though. So back to what we were talking about from the beginning, is the word that comes to mind is disruption. When you talked about in the financial industry, how things changed, technology brought your fudge factor down from a quarter to fractions of a penny, that type of thing. That's disruption. And I'm sure that during that time, there were people that you worked alongside of on Wall Street that didn't like the disruption and quit over it. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen in landscaping and lawn care, because we've essentially done lawn care the same way for 50 years. I grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I remember in the 80s, the rich lady across the street had a lawn service, and they came every single week. And the only thing that changed is, instead of using big walk behind mowers, now people use stand-ons. But other than that, the technology has not improved. The billing aspect has improved for sure. But the actual way we do the service has not. And so that's why I believe it's been tough. You're 6 years in, you're a real early adopter. I've been looking at this for 2.5 or 3 years, and I'm still an early adopter. So what are some other things that you've seen? We'll talk about the landscaper side of it in a minute, but what are some other challenges you've seen getting homeowners in your area? Because you're up in an area of the country that's pretty unique, I would say. So what would you say some of the challenges you've had with the homeowners and getting them to adopt your way of doing it?
Well, I would say that we had challenges early on. I say we have less challenges today.
Okay.
So when you say early adopter, and I've talked about this a little bit, there's an adoption curve. If you look at statistics and you say, there's the innovators, the people that are willing to accept like a lot of flaws.
Right.
And you and I are in the early adopter phase where we know that things work, but there's some struggles. We're really looking for that early majority and bridging that, or crossing that chasm, as they say. And I'm paraphrasing from a book. And so what we're really we're in that chasm phase right now. So we have to connect to homeowners and explain what their challenges and their problems are, and we're solving their problems. So to homeowners, we're solving the challenge of no noise, consistent cut. I want something better for the environment.
Okay. So those are pretty simple. You're right.
Those are simple.
Yep.
So the challenge in our industry is that landscapers traditionally are not salespeople. And I'm not criticizing anyone, because quite frankly, it's some of the hardest working group of people I've ever come across. I have tremendous respect for what they do. They have to manage so many things, and especially here in the Northeast, where it's a shorter growing season, they have to rehire their talent, their staff every single year, because we don't have snow. I mean, the people in in Buffalo, sure, you can work snow work equipment, but here in Massachusetts, it just doesn't snow enough and consistent enough for you to have a crew all year round. So when you think about having those challenges, high cost of living, high labor rates, and every homeowner wants their lawn mowed on a Friday, how do you manage that? So when you talk with a homeowner, you say, well, we can solve that problem. That's great. The challenge is that in the industry of landscaping, because there's no barriers to entry, and it's very easy for a homeowner to just say, I don't like you. I'm going to go and shop it around. And they do. There's no investment. So when you think of, if you're building a business and you're going to have your customer for 10 years, you will make an investment in that customer. But if you stand the risk of losing that customer, and Wall Street was very similar. The way Wall Street worked is your year began on January 1. I mean, your income's just reset each and every year. And it's very similar for landscaping.
Right.
What's it going to be like this year? Is it going to be a busy year? Is it going to be a bad year? What's the economy like? Are people going to build things? And when you understand in the landscaping world that maintenance is comprising almost 85% of their time and accounts for 0% of their profits. There are some landscapers who make money mowing lawns. Not everyone is in this boat, but the overwhelming majority make very little money because lawn care or lawn maintenance is a loss leader. The landscapers are looking for additional business, which is where they make profits on hardscape and applications and other businesses. But the lawn care side and the lawn mowing is really just a labor plus cost, and landscapers struggle at times to manage those costs. Overtime is a big consideration, right? It's really hard to manage. Weather changes. It rains today, you can't send the crew out, so you got to send them out tomorrow, and then they're working overtime, and you didn't predict that, and you're charging a fixed price per cut, but your costs are all variable. Fuel, your truck's sitting around idle. I mean, there's a lot of things we can go and unpack in that, but when you think about the homeowners and why, to really long-winded answer for why the homeowners have been a challenge, is that landscapers traditionally don't push products on their homeowners, because if the landscaper pushes a product on a homeowner and it's better for them, and for whatever reason the homeowner doesn't like it, the homeowner might leave, and that's a risk. So we flip that script at Greener. So by partnering with the landscaper, we go in and we say, look, we'll take care of this for you. We give each and every landscaper a money back guarantee for the first month so that they can apply that to their homeowners, giving them a try. And we take on that risk at Greener. And we've just made that calculated risk that we understand the market, we understand the product, we stand behind it, we believe in it, and we don't mind which manufacturer we use. We're agnostic to those manufacturers, and we provide a better service that the landscaper doesn't have to go and get into that learning curve and start to explain it to the homeowner. It basically is turned over to us.
So I want to, okay, because that approach is what's really different. But before we get there, I think there's a different definition of the word landscaper across the country. So,
Okay.
for example, where I live here in Florida, there are neighborhoods here, gated communities, where the average house is 1.5 million a year, which this is South Florida, Southwest Florida. But those people don't employ what I would call a landscaper. They have a lawn guy. That's what they call him. And
Okay.
all he does is mow and blow. He doesn't fertilize. He doesn't really plant trees. He might do some trimming here and there because that's required for the basic maintenance. But really, his bread and butter and his profit is in the mowing. So you're not really looking for that type of person. You're looking for the full service landscaper that's doing hardscapes. He's doing and then maybe he's doing large subdivisions, and he puts in everything in the subdivision, including the lawns and the landscapes, and then he takes over and takes care of the properties after. That's more like a full service. So is that, because that's where I was wondering, because I don't know Martha's Vineyard. It sounds rich. I do know there are areas here, where people have a full-time like landscaper that lives on their property. That's like another. So what's your definition there? What's your sweet spot of a landscaper?
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying that. And I think that let's be very clear. Our solution benefits everyone. So whether
Okay.
you're a mow and blow person or you're a full service landscaper, the benefits are, for the landscaper, it's purely economic.
Mhm.
There's two reasons for the landscaper. A landscaper may wish to become more environmentally friendly, unless they're required. Certain municipalities are requiring them to do so, and so that's helping us.
That's coming. I
But
agree.
that's coming. It's coming in a big way.
Hmm.
Certainly, battery power is one thing, but also, just overall processes. Because if you think about the industry of landscaping, because of its fuel use, it is one of the single largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm not getting on any soapbox here, but I mean, it's just fact. And so when you look at an operation that's purely just mowing and going to the next property, it's still a labor problem. So when you think about a provider in Florida, let's just say, that's going through a community and they want to take on a new community, there's a limit to how many properties a crew can handle before they have to hire a new crew. And then
Right.
there's a gap, right? So a crew has a capacity. I don't know, it's all based on size and equipment and all those different calculations, but let's just for argument's sake that, a two-person crew can handle 40 properties a week. Let's just 50,
Sure.
whatever it is. Once you get to 50 properties, you hire a new crew to go to, you got 55, but now that crew is underutilized and they're costing you more per cut. And so you're just scrambling to find another job to keep those guys moving. So what happens? Those lawn care or lawn mowing crews are seeking businesses that are further and further away, opportunities
Right.
to drive just
Kills
to
your
keep
density.
the revenue coming in. So what does that do? It adds to their cost.
Yeah.
So if you flip the script and you say, well, let's use robots. So what do robots do? They reduce the labor by 80% on property because you're doing the majority of the mowing with a robot. And you go into trim and you go and blow and you do all those other touch-up things on a weekly or even once every 10 days. By doing that, you've now added to the capacity of the lawn operator, the lawn care operator. He doesn't have to lay off any crew. He now has the ammunition to go out and get more business. So by utilizing robots in that case, it's really benefiting them.
Yeah,
We
helps you
started
scale.
with a huge scale.
Mm-hmm.
We started with the full service landscapers primarily because they're the easier ones to discuss costs with because they have larger operations. They have somebody in shop that is, focusing on the books. They have, they're paying all the workers' comp. They know all their cost structures and they're struggling with how do they make ends meet in that particular division. And so that's been a better lead for us to start. But that does by no means say that that's our only market.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense to me then. If when you say it's a loss leader for that larger landscaper, it totally makes sense. Let's get robots to handle that because that is where we're making losses. So I just want to make sure, like I said, that yeah, you can deal with. And I like the idea of the guy can handle 40 properties. He's handling those to scale. He could go robotic. So that's how you would work with what I would call the smaller guys. So let's
Absolutely.
then look at how you would work with a landscaper. So let's say I have a business. I've got let's say 500 residential properties, and right now we're looking to start working with you and not only converting some of those to your solution, but also adding those as an option for our newer customers coming on. So how would you and I engage in that course? How are we going to work together?
So are you actually offering me that? Because that's great. Let's do some
No,
business. This is
I don't.
wonderful.
So I don't do any lawns. I'm a
I know. I
YouTuber now.
know.
I definitely
I
do
know. I
commerce
love
business,
it.
but I'm putting myself in the shoes of a lot of my friends that are doing this day in and day out. So and
Right.
I'm saying, how would you and I engage? I'm a business owner. I definitely see the value in taking my 500 customers and starting to convert some of them to robotics. Let's talk about first, how would we do that?
So the first option is that we obviously have a meeting and we go over sort of what your pain points are,
Mhm.
and we always devise that the pain points are really on sort of a couple of significant areas. Number one is time, right? What is your labor cost like? Are you getting a lot of overtime? Because that's the single factor. You just need more time to be able to do the jobs. The second is that do you have any customers that require more than one lawn mow per week? That's a win because when you use robotics, you can effectively keep the costs fixed and you can mow it every day. So that's an enormous one. And then we look at properties that are the furthest away because nobody dives in, all at once. They got to
Yeah, they're going to
test it.
try you. I understand.
Exactly. So that's where we start. So we start with things that are easy for the landscaper to say, that's right. I've got a customer that's always looking for something new because there's always somebody that's a long-standing customer who is not going to be so critical of the landscaper when they try something new because they've got a long-standing relationship. So those are the ones that we start with. Once that happens, then we start to use what we call reference when you can say, well, these 5 customers are using it. And then when they send out their contracts or when they reach out to their homeowners, they say, well, we can offer you this. And then communities where there's an amazing amount of, reference between neighbors, especially when you can see the
Keeping up
mowers.
with the Joneses, totally. Everybody who gets a robot, their
Oh,
neighbors will get one. We've already seen that. That
yeah.
happens
I
all the
mean,
time.
it happens. And it happens everywhere. And the beauty is that the first part is that whether or not it's actually happening in the neighborhood. So people have never seen it before. You have to educate.
Mhm.
But if people have seen it, they'll say, I'll see, oh yeah, I saw it on Johnny's lawn. I saw it on Mrs. Jones's lawn. Then they say, okay, does it work? Sure, give it a try, and then you start that. And our pricing to the landscaper is fixed. So the landscaper knows exactly what they're paying going in. They understand exactly the service that we're providing, which is the support of making sure that the robots are managing. So the landscaper does not have to do a thing.
Yeah, that's where I want to go to. So let's say
Yeah.
we've done that. We've been through it. We've picked our first customer. I'm going to be like, Adam, I'm going to give you guys a shot. Let's give this a try. Here's my first customer. So tell me, how do we engage? What's our contract like? Who shows up? Is it my people out there, your people, that whole thing? How does a customer get billed? How do they finance the robot? All of these things. I want to hear about that part.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'll give you a little bit of the secret sauce, but not everything,
Well,
right?
not the secret,
No, no, I'm
just
kidding. I'm
so
kidding.
people that are
I
listening can,
no,
if
no,
they
I
wanted
know. I
to,
get.
they want to
Yeah,
know.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I was just joking. I mean,
Yeah, I
I'm
got you.
I'm an open book. I think that it's always nice to be able to talk because ultimately, I want to promote this for everyone. We're not going to be the only provider. I
Mhm.
know that. So the more people that are doing this, it helps everyone. So first and foremost, what we do is that our relationship and our contract is with the landscaper.
Okay.
So it's the landscaper's customer. The landscaper is in control of the last mile. So if you think about it, they have the relationship with the homeowner. We're not interested in going out and soliciting that. We are not a landscaper. We have no intention of being so. So by contracting with the landscaper, we're giving the landscaper a price. That price is X. Whatever they charge their customer, they're charging their customer. And
Okay.
that varies by market, right? I mean, it's always a function of the labor rate, right? And it's a function of fuel prices and labor rates. I mean, that's ultimately where it comes down to. So if you think about how we price it to the landscaper, it's effectively at a significant, probably a 30% discount to what their all-in cost is to do it manually. So they
Okay.
immediately see a price and cost savings. The landscaper does.
But he has to buy the robot, right? If you
Nope.
determine this, no.
No, that's that. Thank you. So we own and operate all pieces of equipment and technology. So
Okay.
for the fixed price, which is for a season. So if you were the landscaper, Alan, we would sign a contract for that by property, right? So it's
Okay.
we're doing this, and so this property, here's the price for that property, so that you can price it out, so you can bill your customer, and then we would say this is the contract, and we bill you. We either do it, monthly, or we do it on an annual contract. It's to your liking, right?
Okay.
So
So
we do that then.
essentially, then I'm financing the robot through you,
Yep.
and you're also installing it for me. You're with my customer. You're also going, and if there's bumps that need to be fixed or moved or whatever, or obstacles, you deal with all of that headache, all the stuff I don't want to touch. Do you
Correct.
change the blades too?
We do.
What else do you do for me?
We monitor it. So if there,
So you make
so
sure it's
when we
up.
go, well, we do quality control. So if you think about how we manage our technology, we can see a lot of different properties a lot faster than a landscaper can, because the landscaper is relying on the landscaping crew who has a limit. Like we go back to that previous example, if you're doing 40 a week, okay,
Mhm.
you're doing, 7 or 8 properties, those would be big properties, but let's just say, you're doing 10 or 15 properties a day, you're not getting that much information. We might see 100 properties in a day. So to the landscaper, we then furnish them with, pictures and videos and photographs and information that's communicated up. What the landscaper chooses to do with it is up to them.
So
But we
you're the
give them the
uptime.
tools.
Yeah, you're
We're the
guaranteeing
uptime.
the uptime basically. I'm trying to find
Correct.
analogies. You're almost like an internet provider in that regard, where you're a utility now. Like I'm just paying you to do this for me as a utility to my business in a way.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, I think that's
I'm
sure. I mean, I guess
oversimplifying
if
maybe,
I'm,
but
no, no, it's okay. If we could be compared to Edison, I think that that'd be wonderful. We're only so lucky. I think that when I think about how it makes it easier for the landscaper is that there's no concerns. So
mm-mm.
if the mower needs to be repaired, we repair it. And if it doesn't go out of service because we have extras in supply. So a property, that's the great things about robots. They don't need to be retrained.
Right.
They already know what they're supposed to do. So we manage that process for the landscaper. That's today. Now, if a landscaper wants to do it themselves, and by all means, that's okay too. You still need to be able to have software to manage that. So at our core, what we have is a fleet management software. So
Okay.
manufacturers of robotics, of which there are many,
Mhm.
all have their own apps,
Right.
but each manufacturer kind of is really good in their own lane, like certain types of properties. It's not about grass. So like they've done the grass part. So a robot can cut your grass, the zoysia or the St. Augustine, and it can cut the cool season grasses, the rye, the bluegrasses, the fescues. That's fine.
Yep.
but it's the size of the property and the complexity of the property. And are you going up and down hills? And do you have rocks? And do you have obstacles? And what is it that you're trying to avoid? And each manufacturer has a kind of a specialty that they're really good at.
Right.
And so we don't mind who's doing what. So like an airline will fly a short range aircraft and a mid range aircraft and a long range aircraft, and they're all different. They have different engines, they have different parts. That's the same thing that works in a robotic world. Well, you need software to manage that, because how are you actually going to, when you talked about the screens on Wall Street,
Mhm.
I do actually spend quite a bit of time on screens, because what I'm doing is I'm managing and monitoring what's going on in the field, or my team is. So we look at what's the uptime, what's the downtime, why is the uptime and downtime? Because you're still in this early phase of adoption in robotics, where, like you said, people's what was the phrase you used? It's their behaviors need to be modified,
Right.
and we've modified our behaviors consistently over time. I mean, just think about the phone, right? We never used to have a phone with us. Your phone's with you all the time. I mean,
Hmm.
when we were kids, right, the phone ring, like it'd be one phone in the house, and
Right.
you go over and you're like, "Hey, the phone's ringing," and everyone would rush to pick up the phone. Now, the phone's ringing, and you're like, "Oh, I don't want to talk to that
Don't
person,"
want
or
it.
"Oh, I got to take this call." So, we've changed our behavior and the way that that's assumed. I mean, that may be a bad example, but it's just trying to say like technology is always changing that, and that leads into technology will continue to change. So, what's going on today in robotic lawn mowing is going to be different in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But
And
it
so
doesn't
you're going to
necessarily
keep
mean
up
it's
with
going to
that for me.
correct, because we have to basically plan forward. So the biggest shift that we're seeing today, which you probably wanted to talk about, which is, we've gone from a wired world where you have robotic mowers with wires in the ground. And let me just say this, they are extremely dependable. So like the days of using telephones as an example, a wired telephone when I was a kid never had no dial tone. I mean, it always had dial tone. It was like 99% chance you were going to get a connection. And when cell phones came out, it was like 75 or 80% of the time you could get through and you get drop calls. And you still have drop calls today, but it's much, much better. Wired is a great solution. It's reliable. They still work. They're random. Some people like that pattern, some people don't. The wireless versions, which are coming out now, they've been out for a couple of years. They haven't been so great yet, but the new ones, the ones that have been released this season, are starting to work and improve dramatically. And over the next 2 or 3 years, they'll just continue to improve and there'll be new enhancements. But with that, there'll be challenges that you'll find, well, it doesn't do this or it doesn't do that. And so that's just about technology. So waiting for the perfect solution is almost an endless cycle that never occurs in technology.
Yeah, I mean, keep with your analogy of phones. Yes, you go from the wired phone to the analog cell phone, but then when everybody got used to analog cell phones, and then they went to digital, and digital would break up in your
Yeah,
ear.
that's
You're like,
right.
this is garbage. And so people go back to analog. Well, now digital's fine. So yes, you're
Right.
right. It's just that's the technology side of it. So going back then, because I really we hit on what I wanted to hit on. So I'm the landscaper. I'm hiring you. I don't see any risk because you're doing everything for me. All I have to be able to do is crunch the number and go, it costs me this much to service this property. If I drop it, here's all my savings. Do they add up to what you're charging me? And I do agree with the retention part of this because the customer themselves now has this robot that's learned their land, that's mowing better. It's there every day. They don't want to lose that because I do know that people become attached to their robot. They name them. I see people decorating them for holidays now, putting eyeballs on them. So crazy stuff like that. So I can see all of that. So now I need you to tell me what objections do you get? Because I'm sold now on it. Again, it's easy to sell me. We're talking here, but I like the concept. Well, I've wanted to see this concept come out. I never thought about approaching it this way, where you're essentially a subcontractor for the landscaper. Have you had any pushback on, hey, name of my company is John's Landscaping, and we have this truck that says Greener pulling up in front? Is there any pushback there, or
No,
what are
there
your feelings
isn't.
there?
There isn't here in the Northeast, and I think that that's because the Northeast has adopted subcontractors pretty heavily. So you see that in tree care, you see it in lawn applications, you see it in pest control. So there, tick and mosquito spray, and there are different companies that are doing it. And so what landscapers will do is they'll say, "Look, I don't have somebody that can apply the lawn applications, which you need a license for. We've hired XYZ company to do this.
Sure.
And so that's not a problem. As long as the landscaper is control of the customer, and as long as the landscaper is controlling the contract, they, meaning the landscaper, have been comfortable dealing with us because the homeowner does not have any direct contact with us in terms of billing, or obviously we know who they are, and they ask our technicians questions, and we're encouraging of that, but it's about trust. So when we think about the way we build our business, and that's why we're local. So when we go into a market, we want to stay in that market, and continue to branch out. We're not looking to just say, okay, we're going to offer this to everyone across the country, because what will happen is that we'll have one landscaper with 5 properties and we won't make any money, and they won't make any money, and it'll be a bad product. So we'd much rather be in a position where we can actually continue to grow that focus where that reference point just continues to expand, and it's quite large here in the Northeast. Now, you touched on something earlier, which is because of our technology and because of our software, that doesn't mean that somebody down in Florida who wants to try this might be interested in reaching out to us and saying, hey, I'd like to build a business here. Like what you're doing. They're going to need software. We can have a conversation about licensing that. But that's not our, but that's our situation of where we're currently in.
That's your gold, baby. SaaS is where your money's at. So that's good. You're thinking.
Well, I said
right
we're
way.
robots as a service, right? So it's just different. People forget that software as a service started as software and services.
I mean,
Microsoft went out, and it's just one example, and they went to big corporate, Fortune 500 companies, and they installed big servers and connected them with their cloud-based servers. They did all the infrastructure because they knew that was the way that they were going to get adoption. So this is a long-term business.
Took over.
Well, I'm not comparing ourselves to Microsoft. I'm just using it as an example. The robots and what's coming out of the robot world, and we've seen a lot. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a ton of them. What I think, I'll name names here. Electric Sheep's building some really amazing new robots. That
Electric Sheep. Hey, that's a cool. I never heard of that one.
Yeah, well, that's the reference to Blade Runner. Do you remember the movie Blade Runner? Yeah, Blade Runner was based off of a book called "Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep?" That was the book. It was a short story.
I bet the owner of that company is pretty cool.
And you know what? This is going to be a complete non sequitur, but today, unfortunately, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Shining.
Yeah.
But The Shining, Shelley Duvall, she passed away. I'm sorry, but what a great role that she had. But the hotel that they shot at was the Timberline Lodge in Oregon, and that was used at the end, or the road up to there was used at the end of Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner with Harrison Ford and Sean Young. But that's just I'm kind of a movie nut, but. Electric Sheep is based out of California. They did a really good job. They're really now more in the hardware side of the business. They created a new AI robot called Verbi. I think is it Verdi? Vertie, I think. And it's on 2 wheels and it kind of hops around and it's blowing and trimming. Right. And then you've seen like all these other humanoid robots. I mean, you watch some of the news programs and you see that they're all in development. And then in 10 years or 20 years, that might be very much a reality.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't doubt it will be.
But until we get to that point, there's something that's going on, and it's about managing all these things that are happening outside the home. And that's where Greener is really focused.
Yeah. And so your software, because I want to concentrate on that. So because you're right, they all have different apps. I don't know if they all offer APIs, but I'm assuming that's what you're doing is you're working through APIs. So now you can just conglomerate everything into a dashboard for yourself. Which does make sense because you're right. There is no one size fits all solution. Like I like Cress. To me, Cress is like the leader in my area that I see, but they're not the solution for everything. You're right. They're great for certain things. And so you might have to employ a different brand or a different this or that. So you really are solving a lot of the learning. You're basically done all the learning curve for the landscaper and learned everything. You got your software. I mean, I see a lot of reasons for this to work. Now, you said if somebody else in the rest of the country wanted to call you and work through, you could license the software. Are you going to try to franchise this out? Like, I guess the first question is, do you have a warehouse where you are? So if somebody in Florida, Georgia, wherever opened this, would you just have a warehouse there and they stock the robots, or how do you see your growth going that way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that because I haven't really thought of that part of the business yet. But in terms of the way that we operate, yeah, we do have physical locations in two areas. We're here in Martha's Vineyard and also Eastern Long Island in the Hamptons,
Okay.
where we do warehouse and we have a service component. But because the robots are out in the field, it's just a different animal, right? It's really more about servicing them in a mobile kind of world. In terms of the way that you asked about franchises, I don't come from a franchise world. I mean, when I was a kid, my family was in auto supply stores, and they were family owned. And I just like the idea of family owned businesses or chain based businesses. So when I think of like Starbucks, which is not a franchise, it's a chain owned, you can control the messaging and the quality. So when you do franchises, especially when you really try to branch out, it doesn't mean that it's not a good solution.
Hmm.
It's just not a solution that we're ready to launch on yet, mainly because of the adoption. The adoption has not been fast enough yet. That's I think of all the challenges that we've had is that it's, I've been doing this for 6 years, as you mentioned, but it's only in the last 2 years it has really started to get the adoption where people don't say, does it work? Oh, I don't, I want the stripes, I want it
Yeah.
systematic. So all those things have now come. And because they're out in the field, people are saying, oh, now I've got a labor problem because I don't have enough people to work on my jobs. And now minimum wage has gone up and, fuel prices have gone up in some places, close to $5 a gallon. And so it's just all those things have happened. So when we think about how other markets might go, it's really about where do you have density? Where is the need the most prevalent? So clearly, there are some parts of the country where you don't have as significant of a labor problem, where the cost of living might be a lot lower. That's not a market that you would want to start in. And
Right.
that's not because it's not a good market, it's just not a good market today.
Yeah, the technology
So
hasn't come down in price enough to
yeah,
that
I
to
mean,
make
we'll
sense.
use another technology disruptor. I mean, I don't like to use a disruption name because, sure, the robots are disrupting the market. I'm just helping it along in a process that's going to happen anyways. I mean, whether we could debate whether it's a good product or whatever, but I think we all agree that this is the way it's going, and so
Totally
they're
agree.
whoever's going to do it, they're going to do it. So I might as well be along for the
Stop
ride.
fighting it. Yep.
But Uber, when they started, they were only in San Francisco. Their
Mhm.
second market was New York. They were in those two markets for 2 or 3 years before they went to Chicago. So just think about like they chose, okay, I'm going to start in San Francisco because that's where the guys were. And they solved their problem. They were geeks that just said, oh, I want to be able to get a taxi. And so they just started a texting app that created taxis or got them taxis. So when they went to New York, it was like all the black cars. Like my first Uber ride was like in a fancy Mercedes S class. I mean, it was like about $10 or something. I was like, this is the greatest thing in the planet. And,
Hmm.
now you can see the way the business has become very, commoditized with, Uber and Lyft. And in every market, there's somebody that's willing to do that. That's the gig economy. But I think my first Uber ride was in 2012. So in 12 years, that's the change. Now they obviously had a much different adoption curve, ramp up and things like that. But if you think about robotics and the way we are in this space, there's going to be a point where it will ramp up to that, but it's not today. So let's just start and keep focused on markets where we can get a better and better sort of service offering because it will help everyone else when we want to go widespread.
Hmm. Totally. So I'm thinking, and I'm just riffing here now. If I'm a 23-year-old kid right out of high school, college, 18-year-old right out of high school, I could actually call you up and say, "Hey, I'm a good salesman. I can sell a lot. I'm just good at that. I don't have any support anywhere else, but I'm a good salesman. I could go out and start selling and contract with you, and you would do all of the hard work. The only thing I got to do is show up every 2 weeks and weed whack the edges. That's currently like, so that's what I'm getting at. The landscaper, once he works with you, the only thing he really has to do, he still shows up every week or whatever to weed whack the edges, but that's about it, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I see that as a definite way to scale a very large business very quickly if I was really
Yeah.
motivated to do so.
Yeah. And what that does is that helps us too, because if the more adoption we have within the landscaping community, and remember, as long as we're not doing the landscaping, Like if it's Alan landscaping and you call me up and you say, I want to integrate Greener into your system, great. Because when your competitor says, I want to do it too, you know that we're going to do that with them. That it does not, we're not saying you're an exclusive, because ultimately we want everybody to have a robot. It's better for everyone. It's better for the environment. It's better for the homeowners. It's better for your managing of your crew. It's just, it turns you into a business. So if you're really good at sales and you want to be aggressive, there is a huge opportunity right now for people to go out and aggressively manage that, because they can, I mean, ultimately, usually what makes people switch is price. So, if you go in as a purely robotic business, that you can effectively keep your prices lower. So the homeowner actually benefits from that. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that yet because we haven't seen landscapers fully adopt it, because quite frankly, that goes back to the hardware challenge. Not every property is perfectly suited for robotic lawn mowing today, because there might not be equipment that is specific to that. So properties that are really cut up or on terraces and hard to get to places and doesn't have outdoor power and all those other challenges. And we can go into the weeds on that, but those are just some highlights of things that provide extra challenges to people to, go fully 100%.
Yeah, but I see that's where if talking about the adoption of current landscapers, I could see how that'd be a challenge. I run into people all the time. They're like, they're going to have to pry the gas out of my cold, dead hands, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that's fine. Great. We'll have beers and talk about that. But I'm more thinking, I've said this to companies, big companies before. You guys need to go market to the 18-year-old senior in high school that's an entrepreneur that's not going to go to college. That because he's not jaded already. And his dad's probably been using Ryobi anyway or Ego. And so he's used to it because that's that generation. But I want to go back to cell phones because I think it's such a good analogy. So right now, if you go buy a cell phone, you can go to the AT&T store, or you can go to the Verizon store, or the whatever else you have, right? T-Mobile's in my area. And that's all they have different phones, but that's their service is all they have. But there are also independent cell phone stores that you can go to that you can get everything. And so I'm thinking, if I'm an 18-year-old entrepreneur, again, I'm coming to you and I'm opening that and I'm telling everybody, come to me. I'm your expert. I have every particular robot available. I have the software to manage all of them. I have everything you need to keep you informed, but really it's you doing all the work, Greener in the background, which essentially is kind of how the old cell phone stores were. Those guys would sell, but they didn't actually run the network or anything. Somebody else did all that. So it's kind of like that. You're running that network for me.
They were the distribution network. And so if you think about it, what you're doing, and I'll flip this back to you, you're one of a growing group of people that are promoting, their businesses through electronic media. That's not very widespread. I mean, if you think about it, there's 650,000 landscapers in the United States, employing 1.2 million people. And most of them don't advertise. And they have no online presence. So if you're a young 18-year-old, as you were just use that as an example, and you understand technology and you know how to promote and you're hustling, because hustling is always going to pay off, right?
Right.
You can really build a very large following, and you can go out and you can tackle your geographic region, and you can basically set this thing up. And as long as you have density, because density just makes your product better, right? Because you get your own reference, you can build an amazing business just by effectively selling the idea.
Would you wrap the mowers the way I wanted in my brand for me?
Sure.
See what I'm saying? I'm thinking more, I'm a marketer.
See, at the end of the day, right? As long as you're managing the process, right? We're working in partnership with people, right? If we provide, people are always concerned about, I need to manage my name and my brand. I don't want my brand name to be tarnished. Just like I don't want your brand name to be tarnished, because as a landscaper, the last thing that we want to do is make a landscaper look bad. Mm-hmm. That's death to us. So we will die on their sword, okay? Because that's the way that we have to run our business. But at the same time, when you think about it, what are we really saying, and what we really are trying to do is that companies, if you make them happy and you make them money, they're not going to switch. Nobody switches when you're doing your job.
Right.
They only switch when you fail. And so when you use technology to basically communicate and provide it and do it. It's a lot of sticky assets. You heard about that before in, in the SaaS business, and that's why people don't switch. I
Mhm.
don't know which
Too painful.
particular, right, but I don't know which particular music provider you have in terms of, you Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal. I mean, there's a million of them, and people choose the ones that they like, but they don't switch
Nope.
because at the end of the day, they've found what you like, the system, you get it. And unless there's something that's significantly different on a different platform, you're not going to switch. So as long as we continue to innovate and provide those extra services, we keep our customers happy and then they stick with us. So going back to that particular, example of a 18-year-old kid, when they come on board, we just want to build them with a relationship. And if they want to market it themselves, that's great because and we want them to succeed, right? Because if they succeed, then we're going to get more business.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like Android, iPhone. It's really hard to get an
Yeah.
iPhone user to switch, or Mac PC, same thing, right? And so that's the thing with the way that lawn care is currently handled is easy to switch because everybody's the same. People are like, oh, I got
Yeah.
a, I got a walker mower. Your customer doesn't care
Well,
about
they're
that.
they're, they're all not only the Walker mower, but they all use the same engine. They all
But
use
yeah,
Briggs
there's a
and
lot of
Stratton, but the majority is Honda or Briggs and Stratton. So it's kind of like, the operating system behind the mowers. But yeah, they don't change.
Yeah, so it's like how do you differentiate? Well, I've installed a robot at your house now, and that's part of as the salesman you have to follow up and go, now listen, the robot's going to learn your land over time. That's what it does. It's a smart device, and over time it knows where the obstacles are and it avoids them. At least that's what the crest mowers do. Like they learn over time, right? So that's that investment in that customer. That's why I want to be able to wrap it to make it special. I want it to become a part of their family. I want their kids to talk to it because they do we've seen this. So that's where that's the stickiness. That's the getting that thing in there, and they won't change because they don't want to lose it. I bet one day people are going to be when they have to upgrade, they might do funerals for their old mower. Who knows? I know it sounds weird, but I say crazy things and put them out in the universe because that's what happens. The way that is. So I just you can tell I'm pretty excited about the technology. I love the technology. And I'm always looking like you're telling me how you're implementing it, and I'm trying to find ways to implement it differently because that's just how I do it.
I love it.
I love that
No,
stuff. So, to wrap it up here, Adam, I mean, this has been a great conversation. Was there anything else? I mean, I made a bunch of notes here. I think I got everything out. I did want to talk a little bit about the noise. I think that's the big thing. People, um, they do the gas versus battery thing and they get into these arguments about it. But the truth is, it's noise. Nobody likes loud
nobody.
just doesn't matter. Now, I do because I'm a weirdo, but I only like it for so long. Like when I step outside and I hear a gas mower and I smell it, I'm like, oh yeah, it reminds me of childhood. But after a while, I'm like, no, I need to be quiet here. So I think that's really another big selling point is the quiet. Do you find that that's pretty straight
Oh,
across the board?
it's the single biggest
Yeah.
reason why people stay and that they don't leave. Because the moment they go back to traditional, and it's, you and I have been having this conversation now for almost an hour, and I haven't heard anything outside my window. And I don't know if you're in a studio, if you're in your home, but the whole point is that we haven't been interrupted. Imagine if today is a Friday, it was a trim day on your particular property, and they're always going to be outside your window at the time that you're having the call.
Yeah.
So, that's really the key factor. But I did actually want to ask you a question because I know that, how much you really are focused on providing information to a lot of what I call do-it-yourself homeowners who like to do it themselves. What we're doing is not discouraging people to get their own robots. If you want to manage them yourself, people can do that. It's just they're not set it and forget it. And I think as long as people understand that when you are early on the adoption curve, that you can get a great product, but it does require you to actually manage it. So if you think about phones, we've talked about that a lot. The early stages of the iPhone, when people were switching from analog to that iPhone PDA, if you will, they had the Genius Bar at the Apple Store, and you used to walk in, and you had to be trained. You had to learn how to do it. And Apple, I think they still have it, but I would say that they, for the first 5 or 6 years of iPhone usage, they had active sessions at the Genius Bar, and I think for the first 10 years, that's where you went when you had a problem with your phone.
Mhm.
So that's a business where there's billions and billions of users, of their phones, and so I think that when you think of a DIY person, and they're going to also adopt this, and that's going to lead to more reference to people. That's not the market that we're focused on. because those customers are most likely doing it themselves, and they're managing most of their own product. This is a great product for them, and they should look at doing that, but they're typically looking to effectively manage everything on their own. The one thing I will say that where Greener can help is that we also manage irrigation systems. So that's what the benefit of having software systems that are looking at what's going on outside the home. And irrigation is another, we talked about it earlier, that the single biggest factor of lawn issues is stemming from irrigation, either too much or too little. And so when you have smart systems that are integrated, it starts to build an entire ecosystem.
Mm.
So when you start to dream, and I'll lob this one over to you maybe for another conversation at a later date, but pools, not everybody has a pool. I mean, anybody that has a lawn has to mow their lawn.
Here,
So
everyone
that's
has
where
a pool. Yeah.
So pools are a great, there's a huge amount of research that's going now into pools where sure you see about the robot pool cleaners. Okay, that's great. But you still have to go and pick it up and clean it and take it off. But also, what about the testing of the pool balances of the chemicals? So those testers are coming out. There's a few of them out there right now. This is not a business that we're currently in, but it's just I'm thinking about our roadmap about how you think about our business is that what's going on outside the home is really important. And when you think about pools, it's really important to make sure that you've got the right chemical balance. That pool person comes out once a week to test it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a human. And that's great because they're the ones that are adding the chemicals. But wouldn't it be great if they didn't have to show up today because they knew the balances were fine? It saves them time and allows them to focus on the areas that need attention. So that's where technology really helps, is when you think about how things that are tasks that you're saying, like, is that what you really want to do? Or do you want to be doing the stuff that is really assisting and helping? And that's where we're focusing our attention.
Yeah, so I love it. I've talked with some of my friends about this too, that the smart lawnmower is only the first thing. And I can see where your software is going to do really well, especially if you're already managing smart irrigation systems. Because you're right, there's going to be this one-touch hub. There's a bunch of companies trying to solve this already. We've talked about how to add extra things to robotic mowers, and I'm not into equipment. I don't want to build equipment. It's not my thing. But I
Neither
started
do
talking
I.
about it. Is what if somebody made a probe that hooked onto the robot mower that it would stop every so often and the probe would go down in the ground and tell you the moisture, right? So now because there's already a company out there called Mowing. They're huge. They have soil sensors that you can put in the ground that talks to their smart sensor, but they don't work real well. They're very buggy because of the technology they use to speak to each other. Anyway, so yes, there are a lot of ways. I could see that same mower dipping into the pool and then squirting the chemicals in or whatever. I could see these things spraying for mosquitoes one day for certain pesticides that are allowed. These things will do all kinds of things on the outside. And I can also see why your software would be important to have all of that linked together because it all works on itself. Once you spray the lawn, you can't water. So it shuts off the watering and it does this and it does
Right.
that. And I could see all of that coming together. So is that your
I'm
greater
going to
vision?
I'm going to blow your mind away with something that you
Okay,
don't
go
even need the
ahead.
probes. You don't even need the probes. So there are a couple of drone companies that are flying unmanned drones remotely
Mm-hmm.
over areas 400 feet above. You can't even hear them. You can't see them. And they're infrared and they're testing soil temperature. Now they obviously can't test the different soil conditions, the potassium and the pH balance and all that stuff. But they certainly can indicate a lot of significant things that might require somebody to go out and physically test. And so those kinds of things, when you think about big ag, and we didn't even touch about that, but agriculture spends, billions and billions of dollars. It's a huge industry. We save just a fraction of a percent, it's billions of dollars in profits for them. So when you think about weed control and all those things that the ag companies are doing to help you get less expensive food on the table,
Mm-hmm.
those types of technologies are trickling down into the local outdoor care.
They are. And in fact, there's this guy called the Lawn Care Nut that has an app that can tell you the soil temperature at your house right now. See, my soil temperature is 84 because
It,
his app uses that technology that the farmers use.
isn't that great that I gave you a nice plug without even doing it? It's awesome. I think that's
So
great. But
we do
yes,
get soil moisture data as well. I just don't know how to interpret it for lawns because it's mainly for corn. So,
right.
and
But
as you know,
that's where we can help. That's where building modeling around that and helping landscapers, that do that, or an application company that does it, knowing when the optimal time it is for them to go and fertilize. I mean, that's one of the
yeah,
things right now is, lick your finger and put your, thing in the air and say, oh, this is when we're going to go do it. And, every year is different. I mean, we live in a world that's, each year it's a rainy season. It's not it's a dry weather. It's hot this year. It's cool this year. I mean, we had a very, very mild winter in the Northeast this year. And so that's just creates different challenges and opportunities. And so when you have technology helping you make those decisions, it makes it a lot more scientific, which is what ultimately all of this stuff is, and less sort of, ad hoc.
Well, and back to the man, I won't keep you forever, but I think about cars, right? And all the sensors that are on cars
Yeah.
and they're sensors that we don't think about. They're not just speed sensors. They know the humidity and they know weather. Your phone has all that stuff too. And so now for the first time ever, so for example, we have a soil testing lab. And so we have soil test results from thousands and thousands and thousands of homes across the country that no one has. No one's ever tested home soil to the degree that we have. So that's data we have. But imagine when you have a robot on thousands and thousands of lawns across the country, what kind of real-time data you can get, real-time weather data, real-time. I can't even think of all the things that it would be to have an actual presence on the ground in someone's lawn and have that in thousands of spots. What you might be able to predict tornadoes better. I don't know. So I
No,
think
but I mean,
that's,
just, yeah, but think about, the best analogy to that is Waze.
yeah, exactly.
You don't,
That's
I know
never wrong.
sometimes we go off Waze, because we say, well, you want to make
I
sure
can
that
beat it.
there's a route.
Yeah.
I would say that the beating Waze is more like, I know Waze says it's going to take me 18 minutes, and I know if I take this other route, I know it's never going to take me more than 20. You might take that route all the time because you know that the one route that they're saying might have traffic. Okay. But if you really think about the data that they're using, they're tracking all the cars. They know the speeds of the cars. They know where the traffic potentially might be because they're looking at back data and they're predicting and they're constantly upgrading that. And guess what? Your time, by the way, for Waze and my time for Waze for the same route from the same starting point might be different. And that's because it knows how fast you drive.
Yeah.
So when
Personalized.
you
Yeah.
think about all those things and you apply that to other industries, and we've been talking about the green industry today, it is going to have huge impacts and it's all positive.
Yeah. Agreed. Data's cool. That's awesome.
Data.
Let's end it there, Adam.
Great.
That was solid, man. Good stuff. I think we should definitely talk again, especially as your business grows and changes. Let me know. And let's maybe talk again towards the end of the year, early next year. And
Yeah.
I just want to follow your growth. I love it. I know you don't like the word disruption. I do because it's inevitable. Change, adoption.
Change is hard. Adoption.
By the way,
But
you we
I'd
mentioned
love to learn more about your application too. We can talk offline about that. I think that there's some interesting things that you're doing, and if we can help each other out, that's also great.
yeah, cool. And by the way, you guys, we mentioned a book a couple. We've been saying early adopters, things like that. It's a Malcolm Gladwell book called The Tipping Point. If you haven't read it, every time I talk to an entrepreneur, this comes up. So I always like to mention it. It's an older book, but it still stands. So
It definitely does. It's a great book, great read.
awesome, Adam. Greener,
Terrific.
thank you. Guys, we'll give them
Thanks so
links
much.
in the description too. If you want to learn more, reach out to them. I'll put links in the description for you. All right, y'all. So I hope you enjoyed that. I know I sure did. I learned a lot. And I'll tell you, it's an interesting way to think about this, where he takes all of the objections out of robot mowers for professionals. Let me go into that, because I've had some time now to kind of think about this since that interview. And I want to just lay out that business model in a clear, concise way for you, and then get your feedback on it. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment, obviously, or you can contact me through my websites and email me. Tell me what you think about this approach, because this is really the most exciting thing I've found with the robot mowers for me, is how are people turning it into a business? I like to try to see which robot mowers work best and what works on the lawn. I like that stuff, but really, to me, it's more about the entrepreneurs that are capitalizing on this disruption, like it or not. So here's how his business would work. I'm a landscaper. Now that we talked in the term landscaper, he's dealing with people that are taking care of estates, right? They're taking care of an entire estate, that type of a landscaper, I think, or whatever. But let's just say I'm a guy that's mowing lawns, okay, and I'm taking care of 10,000 square foot lawns, and I got 100 of them that I take care of every week, and I mow them and I edge them and I trim and I blow and I trim the bushes a couple times a year, and in Florida I'll cut the palm fronds off, right? So that's everybody's landscaper here that does residential. That's what I'm talking about, right? There's those guys. Every neighborhood has one or two of them that dominate most of the neighborhood. I mean, you guys know if you live in a neighborhood that's established, and it's a neighborhood of people having lawn service. So this is the other thing. Not every neighborhood even has landscapers in it. For example, when I lived in Northwest Indiana, in the subdivision I lived to there, when I lived next to Jake the Lawn Kid, there was only probably maybe 30% of the lawns in there that were taken care of by a landscaper. All the rest were homeowner do-it-yourselfers. And that's because those are starter homes. They were $204,000 is what we paid in 2004 for that house. So you can see not a super expensive home, it was our second home, not a starter home. But what I'm trying to say, not rich people. There's not rich people in there. When I moved into that house, my salary at True Green was $65,000 a year. My wife worked too, but part-time she did. So I'm just saying those are those types of homes. So those are people that are going to do it themselves. They can't even afford lawn service in the most part. Now things have changed a little bit in the way the economy is in that same neighborhood now. 20 years later, there are a lot more lawns being taken care of in there by lawn services, Jake the Lawn Kid being one of them. So that's kind of funny to think about, interesting to think about. So back to it. I'm talking about, though, in this case where we're going to go back to Greener Tech here, and we're going to talk about if I was going to hire him and I'm a landscaper, I'm somebody that's in a neighborhood that has lawn services as the dominant way that lawns are taken care of. So a lot of you live in these type of neighborhoods. The neighborhood I live in here in Florida, I'm one of the only do-it-yourselfers. Probably 99, in fact, I'm sure 99% of the homes, not 99, we'll say 80%. If there are 100 homes in my subdivision, 20 of them are DIYers. All the rest are done by landscaping services, lawn services. Okay? So I'm one of the only DIYers, which is kind of cool. And a couple of my neighbors right across the street from me are too, who used to not be. They've been converted to DIYers now, which is really, really cool. But we're talking about neighborhoods where it's 80% or more people. Boy, I like to ramble, don't I? Hope you guys are okay with that. What else are you going to do? You're going to listen to a bunch of bullshit on the radio? Bunch of negative political stuff? You could listen to me ramble about lawn services. So I'm that guy. I take care of lawns in a neighborhood like that. I've got 100 accounts. And let's say that I want to start offering robots as a service, robots as an option. And why would I offer robots as an option to my customer? Well, Mrs. Jones, so I've been mowing your lawn and everybody else in the neighborhood now for 10 years. And you know me and I do a great job, but we got a new option here, and it's a robot that comes and mows and stays here and mows, and it's quieter. And I'll still be here every week to do the trimming and the edging, but it's going to mow the lawn, and that way the lawn will always look fresh cut. Sometimes when it rains, we have to skip or whatever. That won't happen anymore. The robot is always there. It's a little bit smaller of a unit. So there's a lot of, listen, I'm trying to sell the robot, right? But that's what I would have to do. As the landscaper, I'm going to have to sell the robot to my customer. Obviously, I'm not very, very good at it yet. But I sell the robot to my customer, and and she's going to say yes. Mrs. Jones says, yeah, I'd like to try that option. How much does it cost? I got to work the cost out. Now, we didn't get into that in the podcast. How much does this cost? But what Adam said, if you heard, is it costs about the same. So whatever you'd be paying me every week, like in my neighborhood, I think people pay around $100 a cut. In my neighborhood, we have about half-acre lots. That's with the house and stuff on them. So they all have about 8 to 10,000 square feet of grass. There's a few that have 15 to 20 on some lots in mine. I think those are $100 a cut, so $100 a week, some $125. So he would apparently be able to put a robot on your property for the same price. So that shouldn't change. If you're paying $125 a week right now to have your lawn edged, trimmed, and cut, when you put the robot out there, you're still paying the same $125. Landscaper still comes back every week, but instead of having to do any cutting at all, he only has to just do a quick edge and trim and blow, and he's out of there. So he should be saving time, which means he's saving labor. So there's some savings there. But the customer's going to pay the same. And that's going to have to include either the rental of the robot. I don't know. So maybe next time I have him back, we'll break down his pricing. Be like, bro, just tell me everything, line upon line. Let's look at your P&L. I'm just super interested in that stuff. But he did say it's the same price. So listen, if you're somebody that's up in that area and you're looking to work with him, you ought to call him and say, hey, I'm sure he'll work the numbers out for you if you're looking to be a customer of his up there. And I think that's why it's going to have to be on larger lawns. I think the way to make the math work would have to be larger lawns. This is not going to work with postage stamps because of the cost of the robot doesn't really change much as the size of the lawn does. Interesting. So there's probably a whole algorithm there. But anyway, once I closed my customer on that, once Mrs. Jones and me agreed that she was going to go with the robot, then Adam's company, Greener, they come out and do everything from there. They do the install, they set it all up, they go through all the troubleshooting. And trust me, the biggest problem you're going to have with robots today, I've just installed a couple. I just installed one of the newer ones this year that's really, and I'm going to have some video coming out about it. I didn't have any glitches at all with the app anymore. That was always the biggest thing. The app, it was written in a way that you didn't understand because because they came from different translations. Now the apps and everything are good. The Bluetooth is stable. The way to hook up to Wi-Fi is stable. All of that stuff is stable. That's what used to be the biggest problem. That problem is gone with the robots now. The biggest problem you're going to have now, I say problem, challenge. Let's use that word. The biggest challenge you're going to have now are the choke points. Constantly. It seems to be an ongoing thing because nobody has the perfect easy lawn like you see in the ads, right? Nobody does. And especially larger estate type properties, I'm sure there are more obstacles than there are on postage stamps, right? So there's these different challenges. Well, Adam's company, Greener, they do all that for you. They get through all that for you. You don't have to deal with that. They're the ones going back to fix that choke point stuff and get through that and change those blades and make sure that robot didn't get stuck in the backyard. Right? That's their job. And then they do all the maintenance on it. They have a network where they can monitor it. I don't know. And then he has a platform, right, that he uses because he's got to gather all the data from the different companies and all this stuff. So really cool. But he would do that for you. So in other words, the long and the short of it is his is a bolt-on upsell service. Just like I could do Christmas lights. If I'm a landscaper and I want to add Christmas lights to my repertoire, well then I can buy a franchise like Blingle. I could buy into that franchise and now I got everything bolted in. Now I got an upsell, right? Now I still got to put the lights up and manage the customers and all that. This is the thing. If I wanted to add robot mowing as an upsell, as an option with Greener, it sounds like it's pretty much hands off. It's let's set up our contracts. Let me understand my pricing so I know how to talk to my customer. I'm pretty sure they'll even come out and help close the customer for you. And that's it. So what this is it's a way to scale your company larger without having to add labor because you start adding the robots in. So as new customers come in, you can put them on a robot service. So maybe now you can start to branch out further away. You don't have to keep your routes so tight because you got robotics managing the lion's share of your labor. You still got to go back by and do the trimming, but that should significantly cut things down, allowing you to sacrifice a little bit of route density to do that. So you could scale a business because labor's the big challenge right now. So Adam, I just think I sold it for you. Sometimes guys, when I get on these podcasts, I get really intrigued and then I'll go home and spend time learning more about it. And I'll read all of their literature and start thinking about if I was a business, how would I employ this? Like I don't know. It's like really neat to explore something. And so I think I put my finger on how this business model works and I could see this doing really well. So pretty cool. I would be interested to know what you all think. Leave me your comments below. Hopefully you learned a little something. And even if you're not somebody that's into this type of business, hopefully it just sparks your entrepreneurial mind to look at things a little bit differently, to approach a problem or to solve a problem in a little bit different way. And maybe you can do it in your industry too. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. This podcast will be out on the weekend, so make sure you check out the Lawn Care Nut channel because I will have a new video out there, a vlog style video with some random things from the week. And then coming up, got some sand leveling coming up. That's going to be fun and a whole lot more. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. See ya.